feel good.
Yay.
Oh, 3 times with me. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. Wowzer.
Yeah.
I know, it's already so good. Hopefully I can keep up.
Oh, please. We'll help you.
So, oh, good.
Oh, please.
That's what I always love, is the help I get. So, we started Advent last week by taking a new look in a metaphysical way at the Christmas story that is told through the Bible. And we started by looking at ideas of faith. The first week of Advent is about faith, and looking at the beginning of the story, which was before the birth story, but actually the beginning with Mary and Joseph. And what an incredible walk of faith they took to bring forward something new into the world out of themselves in a scary sort of way, in a scary place, and in a way that was completely out of the norm. So we talked also of faith being an expectation that is so convinced of itself that no doubt enters our mind and interferes with it. And that is a strong walk of faith. And it's funny, when I typed, I have to tell you, when I typed the word interferes on here in my notes, I started to type it as interferes, which is probably another talk, but and then I asked you last week to take a different look at this season and this whole story for yourself by embracing or trying on through this holiday season the idea of that Jesus represents the Christ awareness in each and every one of us. And that when we allow that to become more and more active in our lives, we feel that divine connection more and more and more often, that we're aware of the fact that it's there always, but we become more aware of it in each moment. And then that creates that bigger connection with God, and by default then with each other. Because we cannot feel more connected to God and not and exclude human beings and other people. So the second week of Advent is devoted to peace. Today is about peace. And I want to stay on the Christmas story, but it's so, Nelson Mandela is so this story in so many ways. And because he made this journey, he made the same, the hero's journey, he did it for us, mostly in our lifetimes. He was not always a person of peace. He was a fighter at one time in his life. He was angry. He had lots of reasons to be angry, as far as I could say. But he transmuted all of that and became something so much larger by becoming a person of peace, which meant becoming a person of peace within first. And then, having found that, creating this peace and reconciliation around him. So I kept thinking, 27 years. He spent 27 years in prison. I'm not always the most patient person in the world. And I thought, and I looked at my life and what has happened over 27 years and tried to imagine that time spent in isolation and in hardship and in being managed by other people, to put it gently, and how I might want to remember that the next time I'm impatient at the line at the DMV, and I thought, would I have been able to go into that and come out of it the way he did? Because he could have come out angry and bitter and mean and fighting. And that happens a lot. He was a pretty young man when he went to jail, and when we're young, we have a lot more of that. And I'm guessing that he was not happy about going to jail. in the midst of all of the pain and suffering of those 27 years, he allowed this place of peace to come from within himself, I think partially, probably as a way to connect and to stay, just to survive it, but also because something within him called him into leadership and called from within him something greater. And he allowed that to be birthed by letting go of his anger and his frustration and staying connected and doing the work that goes along with that. What I've learned about spiritual journey is that we don't just step out onto the edge and go, okay, great, I'm going to do this, and it's all just going to be like living on a rainbow. There's the pot of gold somewhere at the end. What happens is that things come along in our life that help us rub off our rough edges. And he did that in some pretty hard ways. All of his edges got rubbed off. But the first thing that he had to do in finding that internal peace was he actually had to forgive the people around him. He had to forgive the people who were still holding him from being who he could be, who were still holding him in a room by himself. He had to forgive those people. And I think in my life, we all get to do forgiveness work on this journey. But as an example, what an incredible depth of an ability to forgive that we could learn from. And it seems to me that in that process of forgiveness and in that process of finding that internal peace, he found the place within himself that recognized finally that no one and nothing had any real power over him except himself. And that he could choose how he would come out of this experience, not based on how he was treated by other people or what happened to him, but by who he was inside. And he could let go of how he was treated by other people and go inside and know who he really was. He said, if you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy, and then he becomes your partner. And how much could we do in the world with that message every single day? So he helped to create the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. If you have not read about that, I don't have the space today to be able to talk much about that. If you have not read about that, even Wikipedia has a really good, the font of all knowledge. It has a good article about what that is, and I highly recommend reading about the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Because something in him understood that great leadership requires, that really, really great leaders lead from peace and lead into peace and lead in creating peace and not in creating war and in creating strife and creating hardship. And he also knew that all of these people needed to be heard. That people who had been hurt needed to be heard and acknowledged in their pain and in their suffering. And he also knew that the people who had done the hurting needed a place to make amends and to be able to apologize. And there needed to be a space for people to do that was safe in some way. And so he helped to create that and to help start moving the country forward, which is a long process, much longer, I'm sure, than he thought it would be, because that's still going on. So there's so much to be learned in there, and I can't stay on it any longer because I get to switch gears a little bit. But I was looking at that story and the whole birth of Jesus story and this story and then the story of this community, which is kind of fascinating actually. We've created this amazing place together. This is a journey we are all taking together. And we've created this amazing place. But this organization has been here for 37 years. And I thought, okay, 37 years ago, my hunch, and I've talked to a couple of people who were around, is that people started to do this really feeling like outsiders within the greater Greeley community. You know, I mean, there's still a little that lingering on. We're getting better about that. But that this idea of a spiritual path that was not so traditional and not, you know, in Greeley, was kind of like putting yourself outside a little bit and doing something that was very different from a lot of other people. And so this community kept kind of coming together and coming together, and there was a core of people that kept it alive for a really long time, but always as this sort of, we're the outsiders place and separate. And then Reverend Leah came along, and I think some of that started to heal, and the community started to grow, but there was still, you know, some of that going on. And then there was deeper healing work that got to be done because of, as she released this life experience. And then there was, for a short time, another minister in here who created a space for deeper healing for some folks and deeper spiritual work. And, you know, sometimes spiritual work isn't pretty. Let's face it. And so when I started here, we got to heal from some of that and move forward from some of those things and come together again in a different way. But so I can only really speak to the last 5 years, but that was, you know, we were in this space that we shared with the Unitarians, and bless them for that, for all that came before that. But we were still visiting. We were like visiting someone else's church. Was this, and then we stepped into having this little office space that we claimed as our own, and we did all of our outside of church activities there. And Mary painted this amazing mural on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Yeah, do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember the mural? I still have a picture of the mural. I love this. There was this view outside of Starry Night. Thank you, because so. You know, and so what I've noticed is that everywhere we go together, we create incredible beauty. Mm-hmm. You know, so here's Starry Night, and here's these spaces that we improve, and when we left there, it was way better than when we got there. There was lots of painting that went on. Holly and Joe are the queens of lots of painting here as well. So then we got to this place where we were ready to step forward and claim ourselves as members of this larger community by saying that we are strong enough and viable enough and big enough to have our own home. And so 2.5 years ago, we stepped into renting this space, and what I love about this community is that we make these decisions together. We had a meeting here. And we said, can we do this? And some very brave souls walked up and put their names on a whiteboard and said, I will give this much more to make that happen. Corinne started it off by saying, I will give 10 cents of my allowance because I want my own classroom. Because that was what was missing. We did not have the space for our kids. And what I found out later was that the day that we had that meeting was like 10 years to the day since Reverend Leah passed. And her last talk was about taking care of the kids.
Wow.
So we have this space where our kids do not feel separate in the world. They feel supported and loved, and they're learning and they're growing and they're amazing, all of them. And that is a reflection of who we are and who you are and what you bring here to support that program and to support them. And I watch some of our young adults now who are coming in and finding out about this in their late teens and early 20s, who are just opening up in amazing ways, and it's such a privilege to be part of and to watch. And all of us, I can look at every single one of you in this room and hear your journey as we have done this journey together. And so a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, we had another meeting, and we said, are we ready to own? Are we ready to become owners and not renters of our spiritual home? Claiming an even greater space within this community. And everyone in the room said yes. There was not, by the time we were done talking about it, there was not a single blip of doubt that this was who we were and where we were to be and how we were going to continue to create this space that goes so far beyond these walls. So far beyond these walls. We started this journey in this building writing on all of the walls before we painted them, and before Mary came in again and said to me, I see yellow swirls. And I was like, okay, do that. Because I don't know what you're talking about, but I know it'll be beautiful.
And it is.
And it is. And everyone, I have to tell you, people who come here to meet with me, or people who come here to visit from other places, everyone walks in here, whether you're all here or it's in the middle of the week when it's dark, and they're like, this is such an incredible space. It feels so good here. And I believe it is because all of our words and all of our prayers have saturated these walls to the point where they're not contained anymore, and we are beginning in bigger and louder ways to step beyond these walls and impact the greater community in positive ways. Because it's time for that now. It's part of the journey. So I want to ask you, what gift you bring to community, to this church, to your own spiritual journey, to your own commitment to life itself. You know, we have created together this place of peace that is open to anyone, and anyone who wishes to contemplate, to take a deep breath once a week, to connect and feel supported. I like to think that in your lives that this has become a place where when you're not feeling so good, you come to be filled up. And when you're overflowing with good, you come to express and experience and share that with the rest of us. Where this becomes a part of our spiritual journey, we come in, just to sit sometimes. Everybody has a key pretty much. You can certainly always. Laura asked me one day, she's like, who has keys? I'm like, everyone. Do you worry about that? No. This is a beautiful place to come and sit and be still and alone sometimes. When I get here, I walk through the building and it's so peaceful here. And so I like to imagine that we are this center of peace. We call ourselves a center, more than a church. We are center for peace and of peace, where we breathe and connect. I know that everything that we create here in our hearts is created out there also, and moves through us as we take that step, as we take those steps that have us knowing that Christ's presence within us that is born, and we're reminded of that every Christmas. That presence that is birthed within us that we share with the world, that we get to start by sharing here because it's safe here to do that. So we have a little thing I'm going to ask you to do. Underneath a bunch of the chairs in the middle aisle, there are containers of Christmas ornaments, and I'd like each of you to take one and pass those around. Did you give Brooke her 15-minute warning? Give her a 3-minute warning, please. There are also Sharpies to be shared. I couldn't buy enough Sharpies for everybody, as much as I would love to own that many Sharpies. So I want to ask you, once everybody has them, wait a minute.
Did you get one?
And if you're here for the first time, or you're not sure if this is your place, there is room for you to experience and express in this also. Because we all have a gift to bring to this planet. And so I'd ask you to join with us in that, in your own way, in claiming that. So take one for yourself also.
Okay, let me pass it around.
Everybody got one?
We're supposed to take two?
No, just one.
Okay.
Just one. Does everybody have one? Hello, back there. We got them? All right, there are Sharpies around as well. But just take a minute in the silence. Let's just go within for just a moment. And I am so grateful for this coming together. And so I want to ask you to simply go within and know your gift.